You are adorable when you play boss, my husband said, loud enough for the clerk at the counter to hear. But you are still just the woman who got lucky. I stood there with my coffee cooling in my hand, watching him grin like he had just flicked a crumb off my shoulder instead of my dignity. Simon had always loved an audience. It was his favorite mirror. I smiled back, the kind of smile that looks polite until it bites. Finish your muffin, I said. It is easier to talk when your mouth is not full of other people's success. He laughed, leaned close, and lowered his voice. I built this life with you. I deserve half. Those words followed me all the way to the parking lot, all the way into my truck, all the way through the slow, careful breathing I did when I needed to keep my hands steady. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not give him the gift of drama. I just sat there and listened to my heartbeat explain what my brain already knew. My name is Brooke Lawson. I run High Ridge Buildworks, a commercial restoration company that turns tired buildings into profitable landmarks. I grew it from one borrowed trailer and a toolbox that smelled like my father's garage into a crew of 53 people who can outwork, outthink, and outlast anybody in 3 counties. I also own, through family inheritance, a slice of land called Juniper Hollow. It is not a ranch, not a farm, not a hobby. It is a piece of my bloodline with a weathered cabin and a creek that sounds like old stories. Simon did not marry me because he admired grit. He married me because he admired results. Somewhere along the way, he stopped pretending. The shift started in the early weeks of a spring season when the Ashford Arcade project hit a snag. We were rebuilding a century-old shopping hall in Larkhaven, and the crew uncovered rot behind the ornamental panels. Not the charming kind of rot either, the structural kind. Boss, my site lead, Matteo Vance, called from the scaffold. If we replace this whole run, we lose a week. I tipped my hard hat back and studied the damage. Then we do not lose a week, I said. Call in the steel stitch plates. We reinforce, we seal, we move. Matteo stared at me like I had just pulled a rabbit out of a concrete mixer. That costs money. Time costs more, I told him. Order it. Problems in my world arrive like uninvited guests. You do not debate them. You seat them, feed them a solution, and send them home. That was when Simon started asking questions he had never cared about before. He called while I was still on site, voice syrupy, too sweet to trust. Brooke, I was thinking about our coverage. Insurance, bonds, you know, grown-up things. I kept my eyes on the scaffold while I answered. We are covered. How much does that performance bond line run us, roughly? He asked. And the equipment schedule, is that updated? The last time Simon asked about my work, it was to complain that I smelled like sawdust. Now he wanted numbers. Why? I asked. Because I want to understand you, he said, like he had pulled that line off a rack and forgot to remove the tag. That night, he had a notebook open on the kitchen island. Not a grocery list, not a honeydew list, a ledger-style notebook. He asked about our active contracts, our outstanding invoices, our machinery values, our retained earnings. He asked with the focus of a man studying for a test he intended to ace. Since when do you care about depreciation? I asked. He tapped the pen against his lip. Since I realized you keep treating me like a passenger. I want a seat at the wheel. You have had a seat, I said. You just prefer to critique the route. He did not laugh. He wrote something down instead. 2 nights later, I walked into my office at home and found him in my filing cabinet. He had my contract binder open and his phone angled like a camera. What are you doing? I asked. He jumped, then recovered fast, wearing a fence like cologne. Do not start. I was organizing. You were photographing, I corrected. He lifted his chin. You are being paranoid. I took the binder from his hands and shut it with a thud. Paranoia is imagining spiders. This is seeing a web. His mouth tightened, and for a flash, the mask slipped. There was calculation under there, greedy and impatient. After he went to bed, I did not follow. I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, thinking about every question, every accidental glance at my laptop, every time he disappeared to take calls outside. A marriage can be a house. You do not notice the termites until the floor sounds hollow. By the end of that week, I made the call that changed the story. I called my attorney, Celeste Markham, the one who had kept my contracts clean for years and my competitors nervous. Celeste, I said, I think my husband is building a file on me. Her pause was the kind that lands like a stone. Brooke, she said carefully, if he is, you need to move like he is already running. What does that mean? I asked. It means if he strikes first, you will spend a long time paying to defend what you already earned. Her voice sharpened. Come to my office. Quietly. Now. I stared at the dark window above my sink, my reflection faint and steady, and I realized something. Simon was not asking for half because he was hurt. He was asking for half because he thought he could take it. And I was done being a woman people mistook for soft just because I did not roar. Celeste Markham's office smelled like paper, coffee, and consequences. She did not waste time with sympathy, because she knew I did not hire her for that. She slid a legal pad toward me. Tell me everything. Start with the questions. So I did. The notebook, the phone camera, the sudden interest in bonds and bank balances, his little performance at the coffee shop, where he made sure strangers heard him claim ownership over my life like it was a shared lease. Celeste listened without blinking. When I finished, she tapped her pen once. How is High Ridge Buildworks structured? It is an S-corp, I said. I own it, clean and simple. Celeste's expression pinched. Clean for you, convenient for him. I felt my stomach drop. Explain. If he files for divorce, he will argue that the company grew during the marriage, she said. That can become marital property. The court can freeze accounts, restrict transfers, and turn your payroll into a hostage negotiation. My crew flashed through my mind. Mateo, the apprentices, the single mother in accounts receivable who worked late because she needed the overtime. High Ridge was not just mine. It was the lives I paid on purpose. What do we do? I asked. Celeste turned her screen so I could see a simple diagram. Boxes, arrows, names that sounded boring enough to be bulletproof. We create a holding company, she said. We move key assets into it: equipment, intellectual property, client contracts. Then we place ownership of the holding company into a trust designed to protect legacy assets. I thought of Juniper Hollow, the cabin built by my grandmother's brother, the creek that ran through the back meadow, the cedar posts my father replaced by hand after my mother died because grief needs tasks. And the hollow? I asked. Celeste nodded. Especially the hollow. She explained it like she was laying rebar. The trust would restrict transfer outside blood relatives. It would preserve the land even if my personal life combusted. It was not hiding. It was planning. There is a difference, and judges know it when the paperwork is honest. How fast? I asked. Fast, if you stop telling yourself your husband would never do this. Celeste's voice softened by a fraction. Brooke, timing is the whole game. I signed the first set of documents that same afternoon. Driving home, I kept my face calm. I practiced my normal voice. I rehearsed the casual questions I would ask Simon about his day so I could keep him comfortable while I built my barricade. Because I understood something now. Simon was not the only one capable of acting. Over the next stretch of days, I watched him with a different kind of attention. Not romantic, tactical. He took calls on the porch and went silent when I stepped outside. He started meeting friends for lunch, friends whose names changed like weather. He offered to help with bookkeeping and hovered near my laptop like a gull near a picnic. Then the second blade showed itself. My business partner, Reed Dalton, started behaving like a man auditioning for a role he had already been promised. Reed handled design coordination and permitting. He was good, sharp, charming in a clean-cut way that made clients feel safe. He had also been with High Ridge for years, long enough that I trusted him like a structural beam. During a planning meeting, he asked, "How much bonding capacity do we have left for the quarter?" I looked up from the schedule board. "Why are you asking?" He shrugged. "Just being smart. Markets shift. You taught me that." The words sounded flattering. The timing sounded wrong. Later, I returned to the office after most people had left. I had forgotten a folder with restoration specs. The building was quiet, lights dimmed, the kind of hush that makes you hear your own footsteps. That was when I heard Reed's voice behind his closed door. "Yeah," he said into his phone, low and confident. "The equipment list is updated. The real leverage is the client pipeline. Once she is distracted, we can peel off the next bids." A pause. Reed chuckled. "No, she has no clue. Brooke trusts people. That is her weakness." My throat went cold. I backed away without making a sound. I left the folder. I left the building. I sat in my truck, hands on the wheel, while my brain tried to fit betrayal into the shape of reality. Reed was not just thinking about leaving. He was planning to take. And the she he referenced was me. At home, Simon greeted me with that warm smile he used when he wanted something. "Long day?" he asked. I looked at him and wondered how long he had been rehearsing his part. "You could say that," I replied. He kissed my cheek like a stamp of ownership. "I have been thinking," he said. "We should talk about the future, about what is fair." Fair. That word is a weapon when spoken by someone who intends to steal. I went to bed beside him, staring at the ceiling, letting the pieces click into place. A husband collecting financial details, a partner gathering leverage, secret calls, a shared script. It was not just divorce, it was a coordinated extraction. So I called the one person Celeste said would tell me the truth even if it hurt. Her name was Talia Cross, former fraud investigator, private consultant, the kind of woman who could find footprints in fresh concrete. When she answered, I kept my voice steady. "Talia," I said, "I need to know who is circling my life." She did not ask why. She just said, "Give me the names." I stared at the hallway where Simon's jacket hung, and the rage inside me sharpened into purpose. "Simon Lawson," I said, "and Reed Dalton." Talia's tone turned serious. "All right," she said. "Do not change your routine. People get sloppy when they believe you are asleep." I almost laughed, because if they thought I was asleep, they had never met me on a job site with a deadline. I hung up and walked back into the bedroom. Simon rolled over, eyes half open. "Everything okay?" he murmured. I smiled into the dark. "Yes," I said. "Everything is about to be." Talia Cross worked like weather, quiet until the storm hits. She did not call every day. She did not give updates for comfort. She showed up when she had something sharp enough to cut. While she dug, I did the hardest job I have ever done. I acted normal. I went to job sites. I solved problems. I joked with crews. I approved change orders. I signed checks. I laughed at Reed's little quips in meetings like we were still teammates. At home, I let Simon talk about fairness and partnership and what he deserved, while I made dinner and nodded like a woman being gently persuaded instead of strategically insulted. It was exhausting, smiling at people who believed they were writing my ending. Celeste pushed the restructuring forward in the background. We created High Ridge Holdings. We transferred equipment titles, contract rights, and the company's branding into it. We tightened access to sensitive files, but quietly, so it looked like routine compliance. We set up the Juniper Hollow Legacy Trust, with language so clear it could have been carved into stone. Each document felt like locking a door. Simon noticed changes in the air, like a thief sniffing for alarms. One evening, sometime after dusk, he leaned against the counter and asked, "Are we doing something with the company structure?" I did not even look up from chopping vegetables. Celeste recommended updates, liability management. His eyes narrowed. "Without talking to me?" I set the knife down gently. "Simon, you do not run the business." He scoffed. That is the problem. You act like I am a guest in your life. You are a guest in my company, I said, calm as a blueprint. Do not confuse proximity with ownership. He stared at me, jaw working, then he laughed like I had made a joke. You are spicy tonight. Spicy. Another word men use when they want to shrink you into something bite-sized. 2 days later, Talia called. Meet me, she said. Not at my office, somewhere public. We met at a diner off a service road, the kind of place where the coffee is honest and the booths have heard everything. She slid into the seat across from me and placed a plain folder on the table like it weighed a ton. You were right to be suspicious, she said. I did not speak. I just opened the folder. Inside were printouts, receipts, photos, evidence organized with the kind of neatness that feels cruel. Simon had been consulting attorneys for over a year. He had met with 3. He had hired a forensic accountant. He had drafted preliminary settlement demands that included High Ridge, my retirement accounts, and Juniper Hollow, written like he was dividing furniture. There was more. Reed Dalton was not simply gossiping on the phone. He had been emailing my internal bid projections to an outside address. He had been forwarding client lists. He had been meeting Simon at a rented co-working suite under the name Dalton Consulting. Talia had photos of them entering within minutes of each other, faces turned away like they were in a cheap spy movie. And then, the part that made my vision sharpen. A photo of Simon with a woman I recognized, not from my home, but from my office. Piper Lane, Reed's business development contact, a glossy smile in a tailored jacket. She had toured our operations 2 months earlier, complimented my crew, asked about our restoration process, with a little too much interest. In the photo, she was holding Simon's hand. Talia watched my face. That is not a new relationship, she said. They have been involved for months. My lungs felt tight, but my voice stayed steady. Piper is part of this. Yes, Talia said. She and Reed have been building a competing firm. Their paperwork is already drafted. Simon's divorce settlement money was meant to bankroll it. So that was the plan. Simon would take half of what I built, then Reed would take what remained, and Piper would smile while they called it entrepreneurship. I turned the page and found one last item. A memo from the forensic accountant estimating High Ridge at a value so inflated it was practically fiction. They were not just planning betrayal, they were planning a payday. I closed the folder slowly. The diner sounds returned. Forks clinked. Someone laughed in the corner. Life kept moving, unaware that mine had just changed shape. What can we prove? I asked. Talia's eyes were sharp. We can prove Reed violated his fiduciary duty. We can prove confidential information theft. We can prove coordination. We can prove motive. And Simon? I asked. Talia shrugged slightly. Divorce courts care about money more than morals. But coordinated business theft is a different arena. I nodded once. My rage felt strangely clean now, like steel heated and ready. I left the diner and drove out to Juniper Hollow. The cabin was dark when I arrived, but the moonlight made the creek glint. I sat on the steps and listened to the water. I let myself grieve for the marriage I thought I had. Then I let the grief harden into something useful. Simon had called me lucky. Reed had called my trust a weakness. Piper had smiled in my office like she belonged there. They wanted to dismantle my life and wear the pieces like jewelry. I pulled out my phone and called Celeste. When she answered, I said, "They want everything." Celeste's voice stayed level. I assumed as much. Then let us give them what they asked for, I said. Silence. Then, Brooke, she said slowly, that is a dangerous sentence. Not if I control the meaning, I replied. Simon thinks he is playing a game where I defend. Reed thinks I will panic. I want them confident. I want them greedy. Celeste exhaled. You want to let them step into it? Yes, I said. I want them to win on paper. And lose in reality, she finished. I smiled into the darkness. Exactly. I ended the call and stared out at the meadow, at the quiet land that had outlived storms, droughts, and death. People like Simon and Reed think they can take anything if they want it badly enough. They had never met a woman who builds for a living. I stood up, brushed dust from my jeans, and walked into the cabin. I had work to do. The papers arrived at my office on a day that looked ordinary from the outside. A process server in a crisp shirt stepped into the trailer at the Ashford Arcade site, asked for Brooke Lawson, and handed me an envelope with the smug neutrality of someone delivering fireworks. Reed was standing behind me, pretending to study a schedule board. Simon's timing was almost impressive. Almost. I opened the envelope and scanned the demands. Half of High Ridge Buildworks, half of my liquid accounts, spousal support, immediate access to financial statements, a claim on Juniper Hollow. He even listed specific equipment units, identified by serial number, like he had been shopping. I glanced at Reed. His eyes flicked toward the paper, then away. A nervous tell, quick as a crack in plaster. "You all right?" Reed asked, voice smooth. "I am fine," I said. Reed nodded, but his posture tightened. He was waiting for panic. He was waiting for tears. He was waiting for the emotional mess men always expect from women, because it makes them feel competent. I gave him none of it. I called Celeste and told her to draft our response exactly as planned. Yes to everything. Yes to the ridiculous numbers. Yes to the fantasy that Simon built anything besides his own entitlement. In the days that followed, Simon performed misery like an actor angling for awards. He told mutual friends I had become cold. He told his mother I had pushed him out. He told me in the kitchen that he did not want it to be ugly, but I had left him no choice. I listened with a calm smile. "Brooke," he said one evening, leaning against the doorway like he owned the frame, "you know I will win." I looked up from my laptop. "Simon, you confuse loudness with leverage." He smirked. "You will learn." I already had. The final hearing came around a stretch of days later, in a courthouse that smelled like old carpet and new grudges. Simon arrived dressed like success, wearing a suit that looked expensive and a grin that looked rented. Piper Lane sat 2 rows behind him, hair glossy, expression smug. Reed sat near them, pretending he was there as support, not as an accomplice. Simon's attorney, Malcolm Varr, spoke like a man trying to sell the judge a luxury car. He praised Simon's sacrifices. He described me as a driven woman who neglected the marriage. He framed Simon as an architect of my success, as if I had not been hauling lumber and negotiating contracts while Simon was critiquing my outfits. The judge, Honorable Maris Ochoa, listened with a tired face. She had seen every version of this story, and she did not look impressed by any of them. Then she turned to me. "Ms. Lawson, do you contest the proposed settlement?" I stood. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I agree." The room shifted, whispering. Malcolm's confident expression twitched. Simon's grin widened like a kid watching a parade. Judge Ochoa blinked. "You agree to all terms as stated?" "Yes, Your Honor." Simon turned slightly, looking back at Piper as if to say, "See? Told you." The judge began reviewing details, voice measured. The official words sounded like someone reading a receipt for my life. When she finished, she signed. "Ms. Lawson," she said, "you will have a compliance window to complete the transfers." I nodded. "Understood, Your Honor." Then I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. "Your Honor," I said, "I have additional documents for the record." Malcolm stiffened. "Objection." Judge Ochoa lifted a hand. "Let me see them." The bailiff carried the folder to the bench. The courtroom fell into a silence that felt heavy enough to bend steel. Judge Ochoa read. Her eyes moved line by line. Her mouth tightened slightly. Her gaze flicked up once toward Malcolm, then toward Simon, then back to the pages. Simon's grin started to falter. Piper shifted in her seat. Reed's face drained, like someone had pulled a plug. Judge Ochoa set the folder down. "Ms. Lawson," she said slowly, "it appears the awarded assets are not held in the manner Mr. Lawson believes." "That is correct, Your Honor," I replied. High Ridge Buildworks is now an operating entity. The core assets are held by High Ridge Holdings, owned by a trust structure established legally before these filings. Malcolm sputtered. "This is an attempt to protect employees and legacy property," I cut in, calm but clear. "Every transfer is documented. Every valuation is disclosed. Nothing is hidden. It is simply not available for extraction." Simon stood halfway, anger rising. "You cannot do that." I turned slightly, meeting his eyes. "Simon, watch me." Judge Ochoa's voice turned sharper. "Mr. Lawson, sit down." He sat, but his face was a mask of disbelief. I held up a final page from my folder. "Your Honor," I said, "I would like to propose a revised settlement." Judge Ochoa studied me. "Proceed." 850,000 in cash, I said, as a clean walkaway. No claim on the company, no claim on Juniper Hollow, no further litigation. Simon's mouth fell open. Piper's eyes widened, then narrowed, calculating. Reed stared at the floor like it might swallow him. I leaned forward slightly, voice low enough to feel personal. "Take it," I said to Simon, "or spend years paying lawyers to chase assets you cannot legally reach." Malcolm asked for a recess. Judge Ochoa granted it. In the hallway, Simon hissed at me. "You think you are clever." I smiled. "I am not clever. I am prepared." When we returned to the courtroom, Malcolm's shoulders looked heavier. Simon's swagger was gone. Piper did not meet my eyes. Malcolm cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client accepts the revised settlement." Judge Ochoa looked at Simon. "Mr. Lawson, do you understand you are accepting a fraction of your prior demand?" Simon's voice came out thin. "Yes." The judge nodded once, like she was stamping a form. "So ordered." As the papers were signed, I felt something loosen in my chest, not relief exactly, but alignment. The world was snapping back into a shape I could build inside. Simon thought the hearing was the finish line. He did not realize it was only the moment the trapdoor clicked, because after court, I still had Reed Dalton to deal with, and Reed had no idea what I had waiting. The morning after court, I arrived at the office with a calm smile and a file that would ruin Reed Dalton's appetite for the rest of his life. Reed walked into my doorway like he owned the air. "So," he said lightly, "rough day yesterday." "Interesting day," I corrected. He tried on concern. "I hate that you are going through this." I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. "Sit." He sat, posture relaxed, the confidence of a man who believes the worst has passed. In his mind, Simon had cashed out, and Reed would soon pick up the scraps, then build his shiny new empire with Piper. I slid a folder across the desk. "Read." Reed opened it, and the color bled from his face page by page. Emails, forwarded bid projections, client lists sent to outside accounts, meeting logs from the co-working suite, photos of him entering after Simon, a draft business plan titled Lane Dalton Restoration Group, with my company's pipeline copied like a stolen exam. He looked up, swallowing. "Brooke, I can explain." "Please do," I said. "I enjoy fiction when it is well written." His hands trembled as he flipped to the last page. It was a notice from Celeste Markham outlining breach of fiduciary duty, theft of trade secrets, and intent to interfere with contracts. It also included a polite list of remedies, which was lawyer language for, "We can take your house apart with a spoon." Reed's voice cracked. "You cannot prove intent." I tilted my head. "Talia Cross can. Also, you proved it yourself when you said my trust was a weakness." I let that hang. "Do you remember saying that?" His eyes widened. "You heard that?" "Yes," I said. "And I heard the part where you said you would undercut me once I was distracted." Reed pushed the folder away like it burned. What do you want? There it was, the real Reed. Not loyal, not friendly, just transactional. I want you out, I said. I want you bought out at book value. I want a signed agreement that you will not solicit clients, employees, or vendors. And I want you to leave today. He stared, trying to summon arrogance. It did not fit anymore. Book value is nothing, I smiled. Then it matches what you offered my integrity. He started to argue, then stopped when he realized there was nowhere to go. His escape routes had paperwork nailed over them. By midday, Reed signed. He packed his office while the team watched in a silence that felt like judgment. Piper Lane arrived in the parking lot, heels clicking, face tight with panic. She tried to walk in like she still belonged. My office manager, Jessa Rowe, blocked her with a polite smile that could cut glass. "You are not on the visitor list," Jessa said. "Also, Ms. Lawson asked me to tell you that opportunists are not covered under our warranty." Piper's face flashed red. She turned and left without a word. Simon tried again later, calling my phone again and again, like persistence could rewrite reality. When I finally answered, his voice was venom. "You humiliated me," he said. I leaned back in my chair. "Simon, you humiliated yourself in a coffee shop. I just let you finish the performance." "You stole what was mine," he snapped. I laughed once, low and sharp. "You cannot steal what you never built." He threatened court. He threatened appeals. He threatened stories. I listened, then said, "You accepted the settlement. That was your choice. You can either move on with your money, or you can spend it trying to punish me for not being easy to take." Silence. Then he hissed, "You will regret this." I smiled. "Simon, regret is for people who made a mistake. I made a plan." In the weeks that followed, High Ridge stabilized like a building after reinforcement. Clients heard whispers, then heard the truth. Vendors stayed loyal because loyalty pays better than drama. My crew worked harder, not out of pity, but out of respect. People protect leaders who protect them. Reed tried to start his competing firm anyway. Piper pushed. Simon funded. But theft does not come with talent, and arrogance does not come with credibility. Word moved fast in our industry. Clients do not gamble on contractors who betray partners. They want steadiness, not scandal. The funny thing about revenge is that it does not need fireworks. It needs outcomes. I spent more evenings at Juniper Hollow. I repaired the cabin roof and kept the original beams. I walked the creek line and replaced a broken footbridge with my own hands. The land did not care about divorce decrees. It cared about who showed up. One weekend, my cousin brought her kids out, wide-eyed and loud. They ran through the meadow like it was the whole world. One of them asked, "Is this place always going to be here?" "As long as we keep choosing it," I told her. That is what people like Simon never understand. They think possession is a trick. They think success is a pie you can cut with the right lawyer. But building something real is not a lottery prize. It is a habit. It is showing up when nobody claps. It is solving problems before lunch. It is paying people on time. It is honoring the work. Simon tried to take my life because he thought I would crumble when he called me lucky. Reed tried to take my company because he thought my trust in people made me weak. Piper tried to take my future because she thought she could smile her way into a foundation. They made one mistake. They assumed I would beg them to stop. I did not beg. I engineered their failure. And when the dust settled, I did not feel ruined. I felt light, not because I lost something, but because I stopped carrying people who never deserved the weight of my name. The best revenge is not getting even. The best revenge is watching them realize they never had the power they practiced in the mirror.